Hello there, this is Ribbo and I'm with Boomer from Caravel Gaming, and we're going to do something a little bit different. Well, not really for us, it's something we do all the time when we're looking at the new sets, and that is a bit of speculation as to what will be the big and, well, not so big cards of the set. We've had a little bit of success with this in the past, haven't we, Boomer? We've called some of the cards that have come out.
Yeah, Avacyn's Restored was probably the set where we had the most success out of anything. When we first looked into that set, we bought, I believe, it was something like we bought Bonfires at $3 each. We bought Entreat the Angels at like $4 each. Restoration Angels when they were at about $4 or $5 each as well. So we did some pretty good speculation as far as the Avacyn Restored set was, and often a lot of the speculation that you can do on the set. It depends what you want to do regarding your variance on the set, really. Because if you want to invest in rares, that's obviously a bit more cheap. That's obviously a bit cheaper, and you're not going to experience as big as swings in terms of what the cards are worth when compared to mythics. But obviously, mythics can have that sort of really huge effect, and the so-called Jace the Mind Sculptor effect that certainly stores and sellers are so sort of upset about happening and trying to prevent happening on pretty much every front now. So our main success has been on rares and sort of cheap mythics that became amazing, rather than sort of going for a little bit of return on expensive mythics.
Now, looking at, you said briefly, we were talking about some of the speculation, not only for standard but also for modern and legacy. Like, for example, we saw Deathrite Shaman.
Yeah, Deathrite Shaman. I mean, to be fair, with Return to Ravnica, that was more about opening boxes than it was about speculating on individual rares, because Return to Ravnica was just such a good set to open at the time. It was worth it to just open boxes.
Deathrite Shaman followed, I would say, the same course as previous cards did. For example, when a card sort of moves into the area of being good for legacy, the foil price on those cards skyrockets. So, we saw this with Liliana, where the regular version did, increase in price from around at its cheapest around $22 up to around $40, $50, $60, but the foil version of it just went astronomical, and we saw that with Deathrite Shaman, a regular Deathrite Shaman being around £10, which is €12, $16, and the foil version going for 4 times as much, where instead of the normal sort of two times as much, which you get with most of the foils.
Yeah, there were, to be honest, in Return to Ravnica, there were several sort of legacy, cards that were printed definitely with legacy in mind.
So we had Abrupt Decay.
Abrupt Decay was obviously one of the big ones. It doesn't have, I mean, the cheapest foil that I can see is about €25 on, like €25, £25. So again, you're talking about 3 or 4 times the value of a standard one. So again, legacy players tend to be a little bit more magpie-ish than standard players. So the foil versions of legacy playable cards really do trade for a lot of money.
Well, let's crack on and let's have a look at the 15 mythics which have been announced in M14. We've got Ajani, we've got Archangel, Thune, Chandra, Darksteel Forge, Devout Invocation, Garruk, Jace Memory, Adept, Kalonian Hydra, Liliana of the Dark Realms, Primeval Bounty, Ring of Three Wishes, Rise of the Dark Realms, Scourge of Volcus, Shadowborn Demon, and Wind Reader Sphinx. And we've got the prices on the right hand side. We're going to take a closer look at each card individually. But for now, obviously, the one that seems to stand out there is the Kalonian Hydra.
Yeah, it's the one that's certainly got the most sort of hype out of any of the cards really from M14. It genuinely looks like a playable Hydra in Constructed.
So here is the card for us to look at.
I think that a lot of people have sort of really got behind the fact that if you give this creature haste, it's just absolutely incredible.
So for those of you looking at the card, it's 2 green and 3 colourless mana. for a 0/0 with trample doesn't sound that impressive until you look at the text box. So the Hydra comes into the play with 4+1/+1 counters on it, and whenever it attacks, you double the number of +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. So when it attacks for the first time, it's an 8/8 trampler, which seems a lot of value for 5 mana.
For 5 mana, that seems an awfully good deal. I mean, certainly if you can tell that we're a little bit older players, as Graham mentioned. Enters play there. He's still refusing to use Enter the Battlefield. But if we go back way into history, decks like Fires of Yavimaya, they would have just just bought this card up in its in its hundreds at that time. It would have been an automatic inclusion.
Now, if we actually have a look at the price speculation that's already happened since the card was announced at the start of the month. So for the first week, it was starting to trading around €10. People thought it might be worth, and immediately, people have picked up on it being sort of the big card of the set. It's already doubled in price. So if you were hoping to pick this card up cheap, that ship has already sailed.
Yeah, I would say the thing is, especially with core set mythics, there's always a little bit of apprehension on them. They tend to be even more. I would say they tend to fluctuate even more than sort of standard mythics would do.
Well, for the first thing, I mean, the card might only be around for a year.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the classic examples on this, would be a Sublime Archangel and Thundermaw Hellkite from M13. I mean, you can understand Sublime Archangel not being reprinted because it had a keyword on it. It had Exalted, which was a big sort of theme for M13. However, with Thundermaw Hellkite not being reprinted, and let's remember that when Thundermaw Hellkite first came out, people were touting this, especially people like Patrick Chapin were touting this card as like the next Baneslayer Angel. And people were spending $30, $35, and I think it even hit $50 at one point. So it mirrored Wallet Slayer Angel in more ways than one. But and then suddenly people realised that, all right, it's a good card, but it certainly wasn't a 4 of in every deck that had mountains in it. And the price on Thundermaw Hellkite crashed hard for quite a period. It went down to single figures for a while, and then it went back up again when it started getting popular and standard again. And I think it finished its days around about sort of the 12 to 15 area.
So first of all, for speculation, we need to look at stuff that is at least going to see some play in Modern, really.
I would say possibly, although Sublime Archangel did spike at certain points. Generally with powerful mythics, or at least cards that you believe can be powerful, they tend to have at least one spike throughout their lifetime. So even if even if the card starts low for a bit, if a mythic becomes good, it will spike in price to €20 pretty much overnight.
Well, we'll come back to all this in a bit. So let's look at this list again, and we'll go through the list from the top to the bottom. Mm-hmm. So the first of these cards on the list is a guy we have certainly seen before.
Yep, Ajani, and not really made a huge impact, is what I'd say. You occasionally see him in a couple of sort of green-white token style or green-white human style beatdown decks, but he certainly hasn't seen the play that a lot of people were thinking he would at the beginning. And the second thing is, because he's a reprint, obviously that's immediately going to lower his price somewhat.
So Ajani started off at around €6 when he was announced late last month, around the 21st, and has since dropped a couple of euros down to €4.5 now.
Yep.
His abilities, they're cheap, but he doesn't tend to stick around that much.
Not really. I mean, what he's mainly useful for is trying to build up, you build up a creature early, and then you try and get him for like the one shot with the flying and double strike ability. That happened a bit in the green white beatdown deck, which ironically used Sublime Archangel as well, is to tend to try and make like a champion of the parish as big as possible, and then just double strike and fly it and smash it.
Now there is a rare we'll look at a lot later, which is this guy here. So Fiend Slayer Paladin, and that's maybe sort of going to be Ajani's best mate later on.
Yeah, he's a well, I wouldn't say he's a near enough a functional reprint of Paladin on VEC, which was always a pretty powerful, certainly a powerful sideboard card when it was around. And the fact that he has lifelink as well, I think this guy is going to be giving certainly red decks a little bit of trouble. Although the fact that he doesn't have protection from red or black, he only has the fact he can't be targeted by those spells. That could be a downside to him, but you can always stick an aura of some description on it and just make him impossible to deal with.
So the second of the 15 mythics on the list is Archangel of Thune, a 2 white and 3 colourless, flying, lifelink, pushes all the buttons here. Whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Starts out at 3/4, has the potential to get very big.
He does, but the one reservation I have is that 3/4 flying for 5 is not very big. It's certainly not very big these days. There might be a sort of very synergistic deck with it around, and obviously people are getting sort of Baneslayer Angel vibes off it at the moment, but this guy is nowhere near as formidable as Baneslayer Angel was in combat.
Now,
and
he needs other cards to
Angel
be more powerful. So
yeah.
we're seeing around speculation around the sort of the €14 mark at the moment now, which would be around $19. But at the moment we have a lot of mid-range going on, so a lot of making very few creatures, but those creatures being rather meaty. Yeah. And Archangel of Thune doesn't really fit into those kind of decks.
I mean, there's the idea behind, like, it could be one of the bigger creatures in sort of a Selesnya token style deck, because you can just use her as sort of a big crusade kind of deal. So I can certainly see her being used in that sort of area, but I don't think she's going to have the sort of same domineering approach that Baneslayer Angel did. And if we look at the price comparison, the way it's gone, that you can see that there was a lot of hype in the first sort of week when it came out, and then it's dropped again, only to like subsequently just spike a little bit over the last day. But it does seem like the overall trend on this might be heading down towards sort of €12.
The actual card, I mean, to me it seems like it has the feel that it's a planeswalker, right? Because it's got those kind of abilities that you would have on a planeswalker, where it's to buff your creatures.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this can go all its way on its own, but there's plenty of creature around which will do it a lot more efficiently. And, you know, this is going to have to swing. I don't think it's a control card, because this is going to have to swing like 4 or 5 times to kill your opponent if it's.
Indeed, I think if we look at the direct comparison in green, I mean, what do we have in green for the same mana?
The Kalonian Hydra, yeah.
The Kalonian Hydra. You know, this by itself will swing for 8 on turn 1 and swing for 16. You know, the very next turn, so it ends the game in 2 turns if it sticks.
And if you've got +1/+1 counters on something on your other creatures, it's going to make them bigger as well.
So, from that point of view, it's going to end the game a lot quicker than an Archangel, which I think both cards are like fighting for the same position in the deck to me.
It's possible. I mean, you might feel that the Archangel's going to be a bit better against red decks, because, you know, 4 toughness has always been pretty good against red decks. But with the reprinting of cards like, I mean, just going into M14, with the reprinting of cards like Doomblade, and just the fact that removal's getting a bit better than what it has been recently, I think that it's not really going to make as massive of an impact as it possibly could. The one thing that we are losing, I believe we're losing Thunder. I believe we're losing Thunderclap, which basically means that there's no sort of easy burn way to do it, because I don't think that Chandra's Outrage is really going to be seeing too much play in Standard anytime soon.
So the third mythic on the list, in alphabetical order, because we don't like to discriminate here,
No.
is the female, shall we say, of the set, the one that's appearing on the box, the one that you will have seen if you play Magic M14, sort of 2014, on Steam or whatever, and that is Chandra Pyromaster, and
Yep.
Chandra comes with a wall of text.
Yeah, that's a lot of text going on that card.
So for those who don't want to squint, I shall read out what it says. It's 2 red and 2, and she comes in with 4 loyalty. Her +1 says Chandra Pyromaster deals 1 damage to target player and 1 damage to up to 1 target creature, so you won't be forced to ping your own creatures if your opponent doesn't have any. That player controls. That creature cannot block this turn. The ability for 0 loyalty is to exile the top card of your library, and you may play it this turn. You will still have to pay any mana costs that go with the card. And her ultimate, -7 loyalty, says exile the top 10 cards of your library, choose an instant or sorcery card exiled this way, and copy it 3 times. You may cast the copies without paying their mana costs.
Sounds a bit naughty, really, but to be honest, if an ultimate on a planeswalker isn't naughty, I want to know what's going on with it, really.
Now, Chandra's been pretty much at a constant €14, so that's $18, around £12. There doesn't look like there's much money to be made from speculating on this card.
Well, the reason that it's around that $18 to $20 mark is at the moment just because anyone who's familiar with what happened when Jace the Mind Sculptor came out knows that traders initially on that card lost a lot of money. They were going for sort of 25, 30 pounds right at the early stage, and we know what happened to Jace the Mind Sculptor's price afterwards. So you will see certainly new planeswalkers, because obviously Chandra is new. You'll always see new planeswalkers at an automatic price, and usually a high price. Just because they don't want that happen. A lot of traders don't want that happening again. Now, to me, Chandra's abilities,
they don't really match up, do they? For example, the second ability goes really strongly into control decks. Like, if you can keep Chandra alive, you can just get the card advantage every turn.
Yeah.
Like, let's look at the top card of my library, it's a land, put it into play. Let's look at the top card, it's a spell, let's play it.
Yep.
Obviously doesn't work in red-blue control decks, where you'll be going, oh, I've revealed a counterspell, I can't do anything with that at all.
Yeah, I mean, the planeswalker I would compare to for that ability is Domri Rade. And I think that Domri's probably better. He's also cheaper as well.
Now, the first ability, the +1 loyalty, to be able to ping a creature, and that creature can't block this turn, it obviously fits into a very aggressive deck. So you're looking at red-green there. Play the big fat green creatures and stop your opponent blocking.
But again, isn't that Domri's territory, where you play a big fat creature and then you fight whatever's going to block, and you trample through with your huge guy. It seems like she's the one planeswalker who I was thinking to try and maybe compare her to was Koth, but I think that Koth was just more devastating.
Now, the ultimate doesn't work with creatures at all. In fact, it works with instants and sorceries.
Exactly.
And being able to copy something 3 times. So you might reveal the top 10 and go, well, I can now do 3 rampant growths. But it's more likely you're going to have some sort of burn spells in there. And those burn spells are probably going to be doing
3 or 4
to 4 damage, realistically.
I think the thing you're going to want to hit is going to be War Leader's Helix or something along those lines with it. So you just gain 12, and deal 12 damage one way or the other to something.
The
other option is
I'm not sure I would
like
use the
Opportunity.
ultimate that much. compared to the other abilities.
I think you just draw cards with it.
Yeah.
Use her as like a mini future sight sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. It feels like if you get 3 cards out of it, that's absolutely fine. It's 4 mana, I've drawn 3 cards.
I mean, the other thing is that with her 0 ability, it is a little bit of a risk because obviously, if you are playing her as you mentioned in like a blue control deck, you exile the top card of your library, and it's like, well, I've just removed a counter spell from my deck. Because if you don't play it, it's gone forever.
So for me, it feels like it does fit into that sort of red-green mid-range deck where, well, you won't be doing this anymore, but where you would have gone, oh, look, there's a Thragtusk. That'll be my one spell. So you play one spell every turn, and it's a big spell. So
Well, it could be now. Check out my Hydra. That's the. Look at my Hydra. You can't block 8U untap. You can't block 16U.
It's going to create a couple of little fun scenarios where the first thing you do on your turn is like activate Chandra, before you play that land.
Yeah, but again, I think she's competing with Domri Radi in that area, so I just don't think she's going to see. I really don't think she's going to see too much play.
Why not have both? Anyway, the 4th card we're going to look at here, a Mythic and kiddie card. If ever there was one, it's 9 to cast. It's called Darksteel Forge. It's an artifact, and it says artifacts you control have indestructible. So, talking of keywords, here's one.
Yep, and it's a excuse me. It's a commander's art. It's a commander card, isn't it?
It goes into Tron decks, and pretty much that's it.
Well, commander games last a long time. A lot of the time. So occasionally it goes into those sort of decks, but they're the sort of decks that'll go in, and you can tell by the fact that, despite the fact the card's not exactly played in any format anywhere really, that's a competitive format, you're looking at sort of, the cheapest ones are €3 and it's averaging out at sort of near enough 4.
I can't see anyone really paying more than €1 for it realistically. The foil might.
Yeah, the foils are going for about €18 at the moment, so sort of $21, $22, that sort of thing. That's like one of the major signs of a commander card, is that basically the original the normal version's worth a little bit, but not too much, but the foil version's worth $1 billion. That's basically the sign of a commander card.
So the next card on the list here, Devout Invocation. Another pretty hefty thing in the casting cost. 1 white and 6 colourless. It's a sorcery. Tap any number of untapped creatures you control. Put a 4/4 white angel with flying onto the battlefield for each creature tapped this way.
Yeah,
not going to be seeing any play, is it?
This just doesn't fit in anything. It's like, if you've got that many creatures on the battlefield, why aren't you winning already? I think it's just a win. It's a win more card. And
it's obviously a ridiculous card in limited, but which is why it has to be so expensive to cast.
Yeah, and why it has to be mythic as well, because it's like, if it was just
just crush games, yeah.
Yeah, if it was at normal rarity, it'd just be you open this and you won.
So we've seen this guy before in many different forms, but this one is called Garruk, Caller of Beasts. 2 green, 4 colourless. Again, wall of text. Comes into play with 4 loyalty. His +1 is to reveal the top 5 cards of your library and put all creature cards revealed this way into your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library. Would have been better if it was into the graveyard.
Well, obviously, but can't have everything.
Yeah, can't have everything. His -3 loyalty is you may put a green creature from your hand onto the battlefield. Obviously, for free. I mean, you're paying the 3 loyalty, that's what he does. And his ultimate at -7 is you get an emblem with, whenever you cast a creature spell, you may search your library for a creature card and put it onto the battlefield. Then shuffle your library.
Mm-hmm.
Again, probably a little bit expensive.
He's expensive, but he actually does scare me quite a bit. There is a reason that he costs 6.
Yep.
Because the way I actually, in doing a little bit of preparation, I decided to do a little bit of a search on Gatherer to see, just for the moment, what sort of things that Garruk could put into play. Because don't forget as well that with Return to Ravnica that we've had recently, there are a lot of sort of multicolored guys. And the other fact remaining is that if you're in a creature deck, thinking, a dedicated creature deck, your opponent is probably not going to run stuff that, he might run cards to specifically deal with your creatures, and he might not have a way to deal with a planeswalker. But certain things that Garruk can put into play, Armada Worm is probably the least impressive thing that he can put into play. But 10 power for 0 mana seems okay. Cards like Borborim, I can't even pronounce it. It's Borborig Enraged. Basically, it's Bobo Enraged. That's how everyone calls it. That's what everyone. Bobo Enraged. Yeah, Bob Enraged. Bit combo-y. For a couple of months after M14 comes out, Crater Hoof Behemoth might be coming down for 0 mana, which is a little bit scary. From the non-Avacyn's restored sort of areas, we have cards such as, I'm not going to say that, that's just taking the mic. Prime Speaker Zagana is another option. You can draw quite a few cards for 0 mana and then actually work on your 0 mana. Progenitor Mimic's another potential one, just a clone. And Rurik Thar, which is going to give control decks absolute nightmares. That's the guy who had 6/6 with Vigilance and Reach for 6. Whenever a player casts a non-creature spell, Rurik Thar deals 6 damage to that player.
Yeah, certainly a good card. And of course, coming back to Kalonian Hydra as well, even that's just fine.
And there's actually the big one that I haven't mentioned yet from Return to Ravnica Mythic Rare, which is actually going up in price at the moment. In the last, just looking at it, just trying to find it. I believe it's gone up by about 200% in the last week or so. Is World Spine Worm, which is the 8 green for a 15/15 with trample that when it dies, put 3 5/5 worms with trample onto the battlefield into play and then shuffle it into its opponent's into its player's library.
So we're going to see some potentially very rampy green decks in M14.
The one thing that goes a little bit against that, from what I can see, is that I think that M14 has toned down a little bit on the ramp. If I'm not sure, there's definitely no Farseek, although Farseek will still be around for the first couple of, it will still be around for the first couple of months. There is also no rampant growth in the set either. So they have sort of limited the amount of ramp in the set, but if you want to do it, you can, because there'll be there's the new Llanowar Elf Elvish Mystic, and I'm sure that other sets are going to have are going to very much have other cards that will allow you to ramp mana, because that's just what green does.
Now let's move from one Planeswalker to another, and from green to blue, and we meet Jace Memory Adept. We've seen this guy before. He's 2 blue and 3 colourless.
Yep.
He has a +1 loyalty of draw a card, and target player puts the top card of his or her library into his or her graveyard. His 0 loyalty ability is target player puts the top 10 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard, and his -7 loyalty is, of course, any number of target players each draw 20 cards. And from the price we see, he's sort of settling around the sort of €5.5–6.
Yeah, I will say that I called this guy as being quite good when he first came out, and no one took me seriously, and now he's in like every blue sideboard. He's obviously a very good sort of control, control mirror match sort of card. There have been decks that have been sort of based around him. There's been attempts at Turbo Fog and sort of Esper Control. He's been very solid in those decks as well. But again, this is the 3rd time we've seen him in a core set, so there's going to be a lot of him around, which is why his price has tanked to the degree that it has done at the moment.
Now, we've already talked about Kalonian Hydra, but it's next on the list in alphabetical order. I think all hype concerning him is probably justified.
I think so, definitely. There's a lot of talk currently around sort of a Neo Fires deck or a new kind of Fires deck that people are getting very, very excited about. And again, as I say, it's just a case of can we give this guy haste? That's what it's all about. Everyone's like, can we give this guy haste? There's got to be something that gives him haste. And in fact, I'm just looking through the cards because I believe there's one in Dragon's Maze which does give all your creatures haste. It's one of the Rakdos cards, I believe.
Well, we'll see whether that's good enough, but another one we have seen before. Coming in 2 black, 2 colourless, Liliana of the Dark Realms. She's been around for a while now, but if you like hunting for swamps out of your deck, she's the person to go for.
Yeah, unfortunately, I thought she'd have seen quite a bit more play than she has done. Just getting back to our old thing, the creature that I was talking about was Exava Rakdos Blood Witch from Dragon's Maze. She's a 3/3 for 2 black and red with Unleash. And she has First Strike and Haste as well, and each other creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it has Haste. So you can kind of imagine what happens when you make Excava and then Kalonian Hydra. Bad things happen to your opponent's life total if you...
There's also that small red creature you can pair up.
Yeah, Lightning Mauler, yeah, that's another sort of haste guy as well.
Lightning Mauler seems to work well if you're going with the huge green creatures theme.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to be, if you want to go completely old school, Fervor's legal for a while, yeah. But that might be a little bit, going a little bit too far. The other one that you might see from M14 as well is Ogre Battle Driver. He's a 3/3 for 4, and whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, that creature gains +2/+0 and haste until end of turn. Let's make things better. You have 10 power Hydra coming in.
So Liliana's settling around the sort of the €5 mark, and I can't see her moving too far off that in the immediate future.
No, not unless they start reprinting cards like Phyrexian Arena and Thoughtseize, although we have heard rumours of Thoughtseize, shall we say, but until they start printing cards, and they might reprint something like, I don't know, Cabal Coffers or something, I don't think we're going to be seeing a huge amount of Liliana in Type 2.
The next card on the list of mythics, coming in at 1 green and 5 colourless, is Primeval Bounty. It's an enchantment. Whenever you cast a creature spell, put a 3/3 green beast creature token onto the battlefield, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put 3 +1/+1 counters on target creature you control, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 3 life.
It costs 6. That's the problem. It's like if you're in a green deck, haven't you already dropped your guys by this point? It's just one of those things. Yes, the effect's really cool, and when you cast stuff, you'll be quiet, but then you'll realise that 80% of the time this will be the last card in your hand when you cast it.
So it probably needed to be 4 casting cost to see any play.
I think it'd be busted at 4 though. That's the problem. It's like you drop it on turn 3 and then just empty your hand.
So he's probably gonna settle down, maybe even a little bit low. It might even go down to like €2.
I mean, obviously in casual formats, things like that, there's cards like Doubling Season, etc., and it's got the feel of a card like that. One that the casual players are always going to be happy for. So I don't think it's ever going to be like a bulk mythic by any stretch. It's not going to be like a $1 mythic, but I can't see this being more than like €4 or €5 at most.
Next card on the list, Ring of 3 Wishes, a 5 casting cost artifact. Ring of 3 Wishes enters the battlefield with 3 wish counters on it, and you may pay 5 and tap the Ring of 3 Wishes to remove a wish counter, and search your library for a card and put that card into your hand.
I mean, Planar Portal never really saw that much play, did it? And this card is you know, it's like 10 mana is still an awful lot to get one card out of your deck. And
so this would explain why it's not really moving from the €2 price here, and it's not really worth it talking too much more about this card.
No, again, it'll probably see some playing casual formats for sure. But again, but then those formats more than likely will have access to Planar Portal anyway, which they'd more than likely play over this anyway.
So we're going up in the casting costs now. We're back to 9. It's 2 black, 7 colourless. The card is called Rise of the Dark Realms. It's a black sorcery. Put all creature cards from all graveyards onto the battlefield under your control.
I took this out of my Duels 2014 deck. So I unlocked it and then took it out and never looked at it again.
So speculatively has it around €2. Even if you think about the decks that it's going to be going into, in other words, sort of mono black control, where you're just trying to keep the board as clear as possible, and then sort of this is your, you know, your kill card. Hopefully, assuming your opponent's playing creatures.
You'd need Cabal Coffers in order to make this even close to playable, and even then I don't think it would be.
It's just going to take too long, even with Liliana digging those swamps out of your deck.
Yeah, I mean, you're relying on so much happening. I mean, you're probably going to have to like ultimate Liliana to get to play this anytime before like the 20-minute mark.
So let's move on to Scourge of Valkus. Triple red and 2 colourless for a 4/4 dragon. It has flying, unsurprisingly, as pretty much all dragons do. Do we have a dragon without flying? Maybe even
I'm pretty sure there is one.
Flying, doesn't it?
Yeah, Dragon Whelp does have flying. I'm sure there was one dragon where you had to give it flying by doing something.
I'm sure there'll be several smart aleck people who'll come along and say, well, you know, all of those sort of shapeshifters that have every creature type technically are dragons and don't fly.
We've got one in the chat already. There you go. Amaboid, Changeling, you know, Mistform Ultimus. You know, none of those. They all have. They're all dragons that don't have flying. So there you go.
So, whenever Scourge of Valkus or another dragon enters the battlefield under your control, it deals X damage to target creature or player, where X is the number of dragons you control, and it has the standard fire-breathing effect that we seen all the way back from Shivan Dragon.
So that's 1 damage then.
So it basically pings something for 1 when it comes in, because,
yeah.
You know, if you have 4 dragons out, I'm pretty sure you're winning the game anyway, irrespective of whether you get to do 4 damage to something.
I mean, is it just another attempt, sort of, we want to make Dragonstorm cool again so you can have another couple of Begarden Hellkites when it comes into play? You know, Dragonstorming for 4 and getting 4 Begarden Hellkites isn't enough. You now need to do, like, another 10 or something.
I think if it just had the ability of, say, shooting something for, say, 3 damage when it came in, it'd see a lot of play under.
Oh, it'd be really good. I mean, let's face it, Flametongue Kavu was pretty poor in combat, and it still got an awful lot of play. So for 1 mana more to have a dragon that flies and can probably kill your opponent as well. So it'd see a lot of play if it lightning bolted something when it came into play.
And of course, we're only going to be seeing this really in the mono red decks. You might see it in.
But again, as a replacement for Thundermaw Hellkite, it's just like, no, this is not going to see the same degree of play. I don't think anywhere near. Again, it'll stay at around €2, €3, just because it's a mythic dragon. So therefore, it will. It's like one day. I mean, we all thought it kind of happened when they printed Thundermaw Hellkite. Like, they finally got the idea that you don't have to make a mythic dragon, like 8 mana. It's like, you know, occasionally you might want to make it playable, but with this one, I just think it's probably a little bit underpowered. It's competing with a bit too much in the 5-drop.
So, let's go on to the next card, Shadowborn Demon, 2 black, 3 colourless, for a 5/6 flyer, which is huge. But as being a demon, there's very often a downside So let's read the wall of text that comes with it. When Shadowborn Demon enters the battlefield, destroy target non-demon creature. At the beginning of your upkeep, if there are fewer than 6 creature cards in your graveyard, sacrifice a creature.
It's pretty harsh, isn't it? I mean, of course, those who saw your wonderful playthrough of the against the Shadowborn Apostle deck, you know that from Jules 2014, where you almost got overwhelmed by a massive army of 1/1s. That's obviously what the what the Shadowborn Apostle is for, is to try and like get this out of your deck and feed it for the appropriate number of turns. But I mean, to be honest, at worst, at absolute worst, he's a 5-mana sort of destroy a creature with pretty much no drawback.
Well, the
destroy a
drawback
creature.
being he has to destroy himself.
Yeah, it's like destroy a creature not called Gristlebrand, and then you get a 5/6 for a turn, so your opponent's probably struggling to attack. I don't think he's tremendously. I don't think he's tremendously terrible. He might be something that. The thing is, the deck that he probably would have fitted most in, i.e., the zombie deck, has probably that's shipped unlikely sailed.
Quite well with the idea of making a lot of aggressive creatures, and throwing them at the other guys and watching them die horribly.
Yeah. And then just have this guy on 5/6.
Yeah, it's a very real threat, and potentially it's going to get rid of the one annoying creature on the other side that's going to stop him from swinging over. So if they've got like an angel or something.
The other type of deck that you might see it in for a couple of months is something similar to the Reanimator style deck. You might see like one in there. Number one, because they can fill their
card.
Yeah, they can fill their graveyard with guys, but then again, he's just not as good as Angel of Serenity, I don't think, under those circumstances. So it's just a case where I think that I like the color of the card. I like the fact that I like what it does. I also like the fact that at least when it comes into play, it's going to do something a lot of the time. So at worst, he's going to be, as I said, at worst he's going to be a guy who kills one of your opponent's creatures and then sits there for a bit. And the thing is, it's not. You are talking about playing in a black deck, so he's not exactly going to be the worst guy to have in your bin just for a reanimation spell.
Now, finally, the last of the mythics we're going to look at before moving on to a few of the rares is Windreader Sphinx. Again, pretty expensive. 2 blue and 5 for a 3/7 Sphinx. It has flying, and whenever a creature with flying attacks, you may draw a card. So even when your opponent attacks.
Yeah, this does include your opponent's. Flyers. Although if they're attacking into a 3/7,
I'm not sure how often that's going to happen unless they're winning that turn.
Yeah, it's another one of these cards where you think really cool ability, but you probably won by the time that you're tapping 7 mana for something like this. It's like if his ability triggers, you've probably won anyway.
And there was also into control heavy decks. If there is a deck it would go into.
But again, at 7 they have access to cards like Angel of Serenity, and a while back they also had access to Drogskull Reaver as well. So I think that Drogskull Reaver's better than this, and that didn't see a huge amount of play either.
Now he's settled down to the princely sum of your €1, so around $1.30. He's not going to be shifting much from that, right?
Not really, no. I really don't think we're going to see a huge amount of movement from him. He's unfortunately, the days of sort of the monolithic blue 7-drop have kind of gone by now. I think if you're going to play a creature like that, it's got to end the game rather than sort of just sit there being cool.
So we're going to move on and have a look at a few of the rares now. I've picked out the 6 rares from the top of the list of cards in M14. But we have a sort of a price from expensive to cheapest so far of what people are speculatively selling their cards for. And at the top of that list, of course, is Mutavault. Mutavault, previously to being announced in M14, was a €20 card. So it was trading around $25, and it's since halved in price since being sort of re-announced. But it's still looking at keeping around €10 there. We have Scavenging Ooge, we have Witchstalker, Savage Summoning, Imposing Sovereign, Lifebane Zombie, Fiendslayer Paladin, Gale Rider Sliver, Xanthid Necromancer, and it goes onwards, downwards to about sort of €1 at the bottom there. But maybe we should talk about the first of these cards. Good old Mutavault. Let's talk about its bit of a history first.
Yeah, when it was first in standard, it was one of the staples in the fairies deck that was around at the time as well. It's just the fact that it has all creature types.
Yeah, so it could wake itself up, and it was a fairy.
Yep, exactly. So, you
had your spell stutter sprites, yeah?
Yep, exactly. So it counts as a fairy for your spell stutter. You could even champion it to a misbind click if you wanted to. There were just so many things that deck could do. Your Sign of Una gave it Shroud and +1/+1. It was just such a top quality creature, especially around that time. It's also seen play in Modern as well, in sort of the mainly blue-black tempo-y style decks. So play Mutavault. You also see it also might see some play in. I believe it sees a little bit of play in Legacy, but with the advent of Wasteland, there's a little bit.
Why did it keep this sort of price of around sort of €25, around $30? In the States.
It was fairly rare as a card. The little bit of trivia with Mutavault is that it was I believe it was a county's, or sort of, it was a promo foil, a full art promo foil.
Now, we don't actually want to talk about the full art promo foil because it was ridiculously expensive.
It still is. I believe that you can probably trade two, I wouldn't say premium condition Moxes, but you could probably get two unlimited Moxes for it.
There were people who wanted a playset of these things, and they were just so rare.
Yeah, they were incredibly rare.
There were only 50 in all of America, obviously, or something, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it was just the winner who got it, right? Not the top 8.
It was just the winner who got one. Yeah,
it was a different sort of foil for the top 8.
Yeah, it was mere. It might have been.
You think it was a mere?
It might have been the Superion. I'm honestly not too. It might have been the Superion. I'm not too sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe that was the one they gave everyone for entering. Maybe it was just a play match you got for top 8.
Yeah, it was. Put it this way, it wasn't a $600 foil land.
So we've had a lot of sort of price speculation, but it has brought the price all the way down to €10 from the initial €12 it was at, and indeed the regular Mutavaults that were around €25, they've all dropped to €10 as well.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say this is probably going to settle around the sort of 10, 11, 12 euro mark, because it's still a very good card. People are going to try and play slivers from M14. It's also a
huge sliver in the sliver deck. Let's face it.
Oh yeah, I mean, it could be a 8/8 with first strike flying double strike, deals 1 damage when it attacks flying, and God knows what else.
Now I know secretly, and he won't admit to this, but I'm going to come out and say he wants to play a sliver deck in standard when it comes out. You did have a look at this, because there are a few little cards that work quite well with the slivers, and you like the idea of beating up serious players with a sliver deck.
Well, I have to admit that I initially hated the slivers in this set, just because they don't represent anything like the original Wrath Cycle slivers, and of course we were both playing when the Wrath Cycle slivers were actually in standard. Now,
here's one of those slivers, in fact, that's on the rare slot.
Yeah.
We have Gale Rider Sliver, 1 blue for a flying man.
Yep, 1 blue. Oh, having said that, though, the card on which this is based, Wing Sliver, was originally a 2-mana 1/1, so it was actually worse than Flying Man. There is a little bit of mention that maybe this card, because it doesn't fit on the Ether Violet 2 curve, might not be as good as Winged Sliver in Legacy. But then again, Ether Violet has to get to 1 before it gets to 2, so it's not bad as something that can fit on that curve.
Indeed, one of the guys we talk to quite regularly, Lee, he's big on Legacy as a format, and he loves ether vialing in creatures. And for a couple of Legacy tournaments, he did try out Slivers.
Yeah, and he became incredibly depressed when he realised he was playing Merfolk, just with really bad mana, which was essentially what he was doing.
So the Mutavault, we're happy. It's going to settle around €10. Gale Rider Sliver, again, settled down to about €2. It's probably going to get lower, isn't it?
I think a lot of it's going to depend on the first couple of weeks or months, because don't forget that for the first couple of weeks or months, Cavern of Souls is still legal. So therefore, slivers are going to have access to pretty brutally good mana. And one thing that you can say about the slivers is, all right, there are some really bad ones that have been printed. I will say, for example, the one that costs 7 and gives trample. It's like, that one's pretty bad. However, there is a functional reprint of the original Muscle Sliver. There's a Wing Sliver that costs less. There's a Sliver which gives haste, which is pretty good. That's 3 for a 2/2. And then just to rub-ins, there's actual finisher Slivers. There's one which gives all Slivers double strike, which I'm pretty sure makes them impossible to deal with in combat. And there's also another one which turns Slivers into Hell Riders that can target
Mini
creatures.
Hell Riders. They also do other creatures as well as players.
Yeah, whenever the Sliver attacks, it deals 1 damage to target creature or player. So
Which is very
that's
good when your Slivers have first strike, because if you've got, like, I don't know, a Thragtusk, you can ping the Thragtusk for 1 and attack with your army of 2/2 first strikers, and he can't do a thing about it.
Although obviously, if you've got Gale Rider Sliver, you just ignore Thragtusk anyway. So it's one of those cards. Just from like theory crafting, the deck definitely has turn 4 kills in it. So obviously, that sort of power has to be respected. The other card that I was happy to see was a reprint of Gemhide Sliver as well. So that means that you can potentially ramp into 1 or 2 of the more expensive slivers. So it is it is certainly. I wouldn't say that it's something that's ever going to be tier 1. It might be good for a week or so, but it's going to be a deck that you'll see at FNM, and if someone builds it properly, I'm pretty sure that it could at least do some damage.
Now let's move on to the card that made collectors cry when it was announced in M14. It's been a really strong showing in Legacy decks. Scavenging Ooze, 1 green, 1 colourless. Now, it was also the promo card for people who played Magic 2014. So if you bought the Android or Steam version of the game, you were given a code you could redeem at your local retailer for a foil version of Scavenging Ooze. Now, the foil version of Scavenging Ooze at the moment is going for the same price as what will be just the regular rare version of Scavenging Ooze here.
Yep. Set foils, however, are currently at €30 and rising.
So we know Legacy players love their foils.
However, as someone said, it's like pure Legacy players go for set foils, not promo foils.
How much play will this card see in Standard? Me personally, I think it'll see a fair chunk of play, because it's 2 mana for a 2/2, right? It's a Grizzly Bear, but that ability on it, ability, it has such a good tempo swing to it, because you're going to be gaining, 4, 5, potentially 6 life over the course of the game, and this guy, if left on the table, he's going to be 8/8.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And Standard is so creature based at the moment as well that even late game is going to be fine, because it's just going to be you're both going to have exhausted resources a lot of the time, and then you're just going to drop this guy, eat 4 things, and suddenly you've got a 6/6 on the table.
Now, should it have been a Mythic?
I don't think. The thing is, the way that Wizards are pitching Mythics at the moment, is that they have some kind of, incredibly like powerful ability. So they're either a planeswalker, or they're like Archangel of Thune, where they affect all your creatures, or they're like Kalonian Hydra, which again affects all your creatures.
So the mythics are basically cards that really swing limited play.
Yeah, I mean, Scavenging Ooze will still be incredibly powerful in limited
He's going
play.
to crush in limited, surely. Surely he's going to...
Yeah.
Because, creatures are always hitting the graveyard, and there's generally very little removal in the set. I mean, if you pop him down sort of mid-game when you've got sort of 6-7 land and there's 6 creatures in the bin, and it's like, oh, by the way, I've got an 8/8, I'm going to gain 6 life. What are you going to do about it?
Hope you're playing black. That's because there's no unsummon. So that's basically what you'll be doing then. I mean, I don't think that I think that many of the collectors with Commander's Arsenal would have been a lot happier if it was printed at Mythic. Because it would have retained a lot more of its value then.
On a really funny aside, I actually traded all mine off the day before the announcement.
So you got 20 quid each for them.
The Commander's Arsenal version dropped from like 25 euros all the way down to like 3 or 4 euros or something. And I got 25 for all of mine. So yeah,
it's nice to be you sometimes.
Some shop owner took one for the team there.
Yeah.
However, the shop owner had that same shop owner, I might add, got his own back in the past when I traded him certain uncommons from older sets that are now worth quite a chunk of change. I'm thinking of a certain Avon.
Would that be things like Remands and things like Avon Mind Sensors?
Particularly the Avon Mind Sensor. I traded
got like 20p
like a handful
each for them.
away of them for like 25 cents each, and they're now all at around the sort of the 6-7 euro mark. So it's give and take. Some you win,
you win some you lose. You win some, you lose some on that one.
I've always got full value for my remands simply by never having traded them off.
And having what? God knows how many.
Yeah, I ended up with about 21, 22. I opened so much Ravnica. And
this is what happens when you play.
In general.
This is what happens when you actually played around those time. I think that was
I was
about
playing a lot of Magic Online. I was redeeming so many sets from Magic Online.
Yeah.
Because everyone just wanted to draft. It's like, must draft. So they were all just drafting and selling all the rares and cards just for whatever they could get.
Yeah.
And I was just buying them all up. So, Scavenging Ooze, what do we think we're going to see it settle at?
I think I'd say around 9 to 10. I think is probably where it's
the foil worth speculating on?
I mean, you're going to be spending €30 to grab them. If you want set foils, you're going to be spending €30 to grab them, and that really means that you want to see them hitting sort of 40 to 50.
However, the promo foil, which is still around sort of 7-8 euros, I think that's a really good investment. I think that will double in price. So go out, buy yourself a copy of Magic 2014. Basically, you get the game for free. You are simply paying for the promo Scavenging Ooze. That's what you're going to be doing. You're going to be paying £6.99 or $10 for the promo Scavenging Ooze and getting a free game on the side.
And it's in a rarity because I don't generally go for 100% completion on things, but I did in fact 100% complete it.
So let us move on to the next rare on the list. By on the list, I mean in the price from highest to lowest. It's coming in at €5.5. It's called Witchstalker, 2 green and 1 for a 3/3. So it is an elephant, as we call it, but it's actually a wolf. It has hexproof.
Yeah, wolves are 2/2. What's the deal?
So Trained Armadon was the original 3/3 for 3.
Yeah, then we had Call of the Herd, didn't we? Which was another elephant.
So whenever an opponent casts a blue or black spell during your turn, which I don't think will be happening that often.
Not when this guy's
out on the table. Put a +1/+1 counter on Witchstalker. Now, the most important part of this card is where it says hexproof. We've had fun in the past with sets because some guy has just made a cheap creature with hexproof, and either equipped it up with as many different pieces of equipment as possible,
Yep.
or stuck as many enchantments on it as possible.
Yeah, the old school troll ascetic wearing a Loxodon wind hammer. Usually was
we
the.
saw it more recently with like invisible stalker as well, because it couldn't be
Yeah,
blocked.
Geist of Saint Draft with spectral flight on it, all those good things.
Now it's at €5.50 at the moment. About right, or
I mean, I think so, probably. The one thing that kind of is slightly against this card is the fact that Voice of Resurgence exists.
mm-hmm.
So there's already sort of a card that control decks absolutely, wet the bed over. So I think that, there's just another one to add to the team here. The only slight downside is that Witch Stalker is just as wrathable as any other creature. So it's really, I don't think that Witch Stalker is, it's obviously not meant to be as good as Voice of Resurgence, but I think it's still a perfectly feasible card. It's basically, see, the way I'm thinking about it here is that Troll Ascetic I think was probably better than this, just mainly because of its regenerate. The fact that it, because of the fact it regenerates, it's like this guy you can probably mitigate to a certain degree. It's like if you're sort of a bank control deck, you just make Centaur Healer and just stare at it. Or you make Loxodon Smiter and smash through it, whichever way you want to. So it might make the control decks think a little bit again, but I think that this guy might have been. You can see that he had like a really big sort of spike immediately. He almost sort of doubled in price in the first day that he was, the first day he was announced. He almost doubled in price, and he's sort of calmed down, and the trend's down in the past like 5 or 6 days. So I think that this guy will probably settle around sort of the 450 area. Again, I think that the obvious comparison's Troll Ascetic, and I think Troll Ascetic was probably better than this guy.
So let us move on to probably the most speculated about card, which is Savage Summoning. 1 green, it's an instant. It cannot be countered. The next creature card you cast this turn also cannot be countered. It will give it Flash, and that creature will enter the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it.
I mean,
it's nothing special as far as I see.
I don't think it's. The problem with cards like this are always you're investing so much in a card.
Well, you're investing in a card. Quite literally, it will cost you a card to put another card into play.
Which they can then just Doomblade or unsummon or do something along those lines. So I'm not quite sure where like the massive hype for this is coming from at the moment, because it does, as we said, it requires a big investment.
Similar thing to Cavern of Souls.
Yeah, except that Cavern of Souls is a land, so it's not an investment, because Cavern of Souls is just a land in the first place, whereas this is requiring you to play 2 cards in order to play a creature spell, just to make it a bit bigger. It's basically you're using
it's
2 cards.
Trick, right?
Yeah.
I mean, your opponent attacks and you go, haha, flash creature, and then they kill it with an instant or something, right?
Yeah, I mean it. I can see where they're coming from with the card, and they've tried to make it as good as possible. But if we remember back to the Overmaster, and I'm sure there was one that was for creatures as well in that set, those cards had draw a card on them, and they had a huge amount of hype, and big prices, and inevitably they just tanked. Yeah, and you occasionally see Overmaster now, but you don't see a lot. And in fact,
there is a legacy deck which Overmaster goes into at the moment.
And again, you can actually see that that's the show and tell deck, because again, it's a combo deck, so therefore you're fine with the investment, because if your combo happens, you kill your opponent. And also the fact that Overmaster has draw a card written on it, so it's not necessarily a investment. But the one thing you can see, again, this card had a massive spike, and then it really collapsed, and then it sort of, recovered and went down, but the general trend of it is downwards currently. So, it's one of those cards that if you can get sort of, a lot of people are charging sort of €6-7 for it now. If you can get €6 or €7 for it now, I'd recommend you do.
That is selling them for €6 or €7.
Yeah, because I think this is going to flatten at like 3 or 4. Because it's just. I don't see it doing what people think that it's going to do. I mean, Autumn's Veil never got any play either.
So let's look at a card which is trading at around €4.5 to €5 at the moment. It is a very small white weenie based creature. It's 1 white and 1 colourless. Its name is Imposing Sovereign. It's a human, and creatures your opponent control enter the battlefield tapped. So
very, very nice ability.
We've seen this before, but it's been on an enchantment.
Yeah, it's been on an enchantment. I think it's also been on like a 4 or 5 casting cost creature as well in the past. I don't think it's ever been on anything this small.
So in an aggressive white weenie deck, which obviously this will go into, this feels staple-ish to me.
It does really. I think that this is going to be a pretty staple 2-drop. I think that especially when Thalia rotates as well, that leaves that leaves a bit of a hole in the 2-drop. And I just think that this guy's going to be pretty good as far as that goes. I think just a lot of the time these sort of weenie decks, especially against sort of the mid-range decks, are often looking for that 1 extra turn, and this gives you that 1 extra turn because your opponent can't.
Good enough for formats outside of standard.
Also gets around Savage summoning a creature during combat because it comes into play tapped.
Is it good enough for Modern? Is it good enough for Legacy?
I don't know. Is the answer on that? Is the answer on that front? I don't think so.
I mean, Thalia is obviously.
Thalia just brutalizes control deck.
That's your 2-drop for 1 white and 1 if you had to pick one.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think that this. I certainly don't think it's legacy playable, but like modern playable. I mean, it might be another sort of hate bear to go in that deck, but I was never a huge fan of the hate bear style deck anyway. I think there's just more powerful things you can do in standard. In modern. And eventually someone's going to power through, and like a 2-1 for 2 generally, unless it does something pretty damn brutal, it's not going to see a huge amount of play in modern.
So next on the list is Lifebane Zombie for 2 black and 1. It is a zombie warrior, so it wasn't happy being a zombie, it had to enlist. And it's a 3-1 with Intimidate, and when Lifebane Zombie enters the battlefield, target opponent reveals his or her hand. You choose a green or white creature card from it and exile that card. So is it sideboard or main deck?
It's sideboard, I think. It's a little bit of preemptive removal, isn't it? But if you cast this and you see like islands and swamps out of your opponent immediately, you're going to feel a little bit sad. Like 3-1 Intimidate for 3 is not anything really to write home about.
Not good enough for even in just sort of a zombie deck?
I don't know if a zombie deck's going to exist, to tell you the truth. I think you might see it in the sideboard of like a pure zombie deck for a while, just before Theros, because it'd be a way for it to deal with all the sort of mid-range decks. You'll see it like try to take Restoration Angels and Thrag Tusks out of their opponent's hand before they hit the board and actually do their damage. Although then again, his appetite for brain's just better while it's still around as well. It's one of those. It's a difficult card to sort of judge, but the fact that it's a guy and it does something, and a mid-range sort of green X control deck, so the decks it's targeted at won't be able to block it either for the most part. I think that it's going to do enough.
A sideboard slot on the card, though. I mean, surely I think it's going to end up at around sort of €1 or something, really.
I'm honestly not sure. I think the fact that it's got Intimidate, so you can strap equipment to it and really make it a big clock. I think that that's something that you could look at. So I certainly think that this will plateau around sort of 2 or 3 probably. If it sees play as a sideboard card, which I'm sure it will at some point, because the problem that the zombie deck has is when its opponent gets into the mid game. And so you can like stop the mid game happening, or at least stop it being that devastating with this guy.
So we've just gone over the hour mark on the video. So the last card we're going to look at is one we briefly mentioned before, right at the start of the video. Fiend Slayer Paladin, 2 white and 1 for a 2/2 human knight. It has first strike, it has lifelink, and it can't be the target of black or red spells your opponents control. And it's trading around the €3 mark at the moment.
I think it'll probably stay around there, sort of €253. The one card that you have to sort of compare this to is Silverblade Paladin, because they're probably fighting at the same mana cost. I think Silverblade's probably better than this guy, just in terms of the just sheer damage it can dole out. However, this guy's going to be a major pain in the backside for red and black decks. The fact he doesn't have protection from red or black doesn't mean means that he's not he's not just the non-shall pass wall that Paladin on Vec used to be. But that can easily be solved with either an aura or a equipment of some description or something like that, and then this guy just becomes pretty much impossible to deal with.
Yeah, if you stick a sort of a green enchantment on him, give him +3/+3.
Yeah.
Like small children-based cards are always good for that.
Well, Ranker's legal for a while, 4/2 first strike lifelink. It's not really too terrible. But I think these. I like the idea that Wizards have with M14, where they're printing they are printing kind of hate cards, but they're not the hate cards we used to back in the day with like Perish, Chill, and all those sort of cards that were just plain and simple hosers. It's in fact, this card is very good against a certain color combination, but it's not hideous otherwise. But I still think that it's a sideboard card,
so
at least at the beginning.
A few other cards really around the €2 mark at the moment, which we're not going to bring up individually. Door of Destinies, one you were looking at for your Sliver deck.
Probably not. Look, it costs 4. It doesn't put a dude in play. It doesn't deal damage.
And from the rest of that list, the one card which is maybe going up speculatively currently, Vastwood Hydra.
Yeah, that's surprised me a little bit there. It definitely has. It's definitely got a tendency upwards. It was a 50p card a couple of weeks ago, and now it's up near 3.
Originally, Mark Rosewater, when he looked at cards like this, he called them creature balls because, Fireball was red and X, and the creature ball was green and X. And this one is green, green, and X. For an XX, token creature. And when it dies, you get to transfer the +1/+1 counters to another creature.
Yep, I mean, I think a lot of this price rise is based around the hype around Kalonian Hydra. Again, it's a creature that has +1/+1 counters on it, so when the Hydras both attack, they'll just become enormous.
But the Kalonian Hydra by itself doesn't need any friends.
No, but it's nice to have friends, And I think that just the hype, I'm not sure how that deck's going to come together. I think it's probably going to be a fire style shell, probably in Jund colours.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that either you go down the route of trying to find some ramp spells and trying to find some burn spells. So you're either trying to keep the board clear early, burning out whatever's in the way, and then dropping your guy and hoping he sticks.
Yeah, I mean, for a while you're going to have Arbor Elf, you're going to have the new Llanowar Elf, you're going to have Farseek, you're going to have, Searing Spears, you're going to have Pillar of Flames.
Scavenging Ooze will have counters on it.
Yeah, that's also potential as well. All these things are leading towards this sort of fire deck.
Gavany Township,
that puts a lot of counters on, probably in the wrong colours. Although I imagine if there's a Jund version, there will be a Naya version as well. I imagine as well. So, and you could give Archangel of Thune haste as well, and then all of a sudden everything has +1/+1 counters as well. So, you could put it in either a Naya or a Jund shell. The Jund shell probably gives you access to more removal and another couple of fervor style guys. Whereas the Naya
Or maybe
style
you're
build,
thinking it goes, in with the Rakdos type guys that you can unleash.
yeah, exactly. They've all got counters, haven't they? So you've got Rakdos Cackler, you've got I think there's a 2/3 first strike one or 3/2 first strike one, something like that, and then there's obviously Xaver as well. So there's that's certainly one of the routes that the deck can go down.
And maybe is the route it should go down, because the red cards are going to be the ones that will be giving it haste, which is
Yeah.
what you really want.
Yeah, exactly, and it also gives it a couple of powerful early game drops in case it misses in case it sort of misses its elf on turn one.
Anyway, I think that wraps up this discussion quite nicely. We've been at it for 75 minutes, so as always, we are interested in hearing what you have to say, so feel free to post your own opinions on our Facebook, and sure, why not? Why not on the video itself on YouTube? I'm sure we'll see it at some point. But for now, from myself and Boomer, this is Cowbell Gaming signing off.